discuss this important issue. I have with me the chairman of the Pulaski County Republicans, Mark Johnson. He's also the chairman of the Association of Republican Chairmen. Did I say that right, Mark? Mark, are you with us? Do we not have Mark with us? Mark, can you hear me?
Paul, I'm here.
There you are.
Here.
No, okay. So,
Thank you.
So you're the chairman of the Republican County Chairmen, right?
Well, they call it the president of the Arkansas Republican County Chairs Association.
Okay, well, yeah.
And Paul, let me make clear and do my quick little disclaimer. We haven't met and discussed this, and so I am speaking for Mark Johnson only. And I think I've talked to some of my colleagues, other county chairs, and they share my concerns. But as officially the organization hasn't, we haven't met since the end of July, so certainly we haven't discussed this. But
I understand. But you go ahead. But the same thing goes for the Pulaski County Republicans. You're just speaking for Mark Johnson, right?
That's true. But I can tell you that a lot of my friends that are members of our county committee, as well as people who are other county chairs around the state, share a lot of my feelings on this. But there's no official position. And let me say this in all fairness: the only person that speaks for the Republican Party is Chairman Webb, and his statement, although I think it was a little too neutral from my way of thinking, was correct in that he pointed out some facts. Of course, Senator Files is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. On the other hand,
have you read that indictment?
We have to.
Good grief! Have you read the indictment?
Well, I've read this thing, and that's why I feel the way I do.
I'm sorry, the affidavit. The affidavit, not the indictment. My apologies. Go ahead.
I did read it, and let's clarify. There has not yet been an indictment. However, sometimes when someone is under investigation, there's a locked closet over at the FBI office, and all this evidence is being piled up to take to a grand jury, which is of course secret. But in this particular case, we're dealing with things that are absolutely in the public record. What could seriously be considered to be misappropriation of general improvement funds, some shady operations in the procurement process on this ball field, in Sebastian County, and it's more than just a little bit of smoke. There's a pretty good simmering fire that the public can look at, and it's very troubling to me. And actually, Paul, this is not just about this situation with Senator Files. We've had the issue earlier in the year with former Representative Micah Neal and Senator John Woods, and it's the same kind of thing. It's an abuse of power and abuse of authority, and the kind of thing that we many of us are Republicans because we didn't want to do this. We watched the Democrats do this for many, many years, and it's imperative that as Republican leaders, we demand that our people do better. And if they don't do better, they need to step out of there. I, for one, didn't go through what I have as a Republican for over 37 years to have some young thieves tarnish the brand that was built by Governor Winthrop Rockefeller, his son, Lynn Paul Rockefeller, John Paul Hammerschmidt, Ed Bethune, and other leaders of integrity that I think stand against this type of thing. And
Absolutely.
In the words of Chairman Webb that he said in the speech that I heard not too long ago, he said, as the majority party, we have to work hard and be careful not to become what we've replaced. And that's what I'm fighting against now. I don't want us to become what we've replaced.
I appreciate we're talking with Mark Johnson. I so appreciate you saying this, and because you're exactly right. So you let me just get you on record. I mean, do you believe that Jake Files should resign?
Yeah, I absolutely believe he should resign, and not necessarily just because of the situation, but because this is clearly not going to go away. You don't have to, be an attorney to see the kind of problems he has. He can't do his job properly and deal with this. And what could happen is by not having, if he doesn't resign soon to allow Governor Hutchinson to call a special election, it's quite likely that there couldn't be a special election before the fiscal session, and that the citizens of that district wouldn't be represented when the legislature meets in I guess it's early February. So when something like this happens, and I think the local paper, the Southwest Times Record, which you alluded to a moment ago, in their editorial, I think they pointed out how this just needs to be stopped. And if he is indeed innocent, he can spend his time proving that. And certainly I would give him, as Chairman Webb said in his statement, he is innocent until proven guilty. But on the other hand, he doesn't have the right to drag down the constituents of his district and all that. Paul, this whole general improvement fund thing has just been just a holy mess. I mean, this started, and just to kind of help your listeners kind of get a perspective on this, the
maintenance of a free society is a very difficult and complicated thing, and it requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind. It requires a willingness to put up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you will spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. We lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
Hey folks, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Paul, and you have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine, and we want you to be a part of that. One of the ways you can do that is to call us or text us. That number, 870-275-9799. We have got a great show for you. Coming up today, at the bottom of this hour, we'll be talking with former State Representative Mike Wilson. Mike Wilson was in front of the Arkansas Supreme Court today, where they heard oral arguments that were based on briefs that were submitted to the court having to do with general improvement funds and what's constitutional and what's not. Mike Wilson contends that having legislators dole out and take credit for taxpayer money into their districts is unconstitutional, whether they do it directly or whether they do it indirectly by laundering the money through the economic planning development districts. By the way, I used that exact phrase in the interview with Mike because we did this earlier in the day, right after he got home, and he agreed 100% with my characterization that this is, in fact, a form of money laundering. It's legal money laundering, but then again, I couldn't help it. Maybe that's why some of these guys who are in trouble being prosecuted have made plea deals when it comes to general improvement funds. Jake Files, for example, is mentioned in an FBI sworn affidavit. Maybe some of these guys said, well, if the government can launder it to get around the legal restrictions, which in this case was a court precedent by Mike Wilson himself, maybe we can do the same thing. So we'll have that for you at 4:30. Then at 5 o'clock, we'll be doing a Conduit for Action quiz. That's over at conduitforaction.org. That's conduitforaction.org on government spending. So, Joe, you will be once again venturing out and letting us know what you think about this quiz. So certainly want to stay tuned for that. And then at 5:30 this morning, I talked to Congressman Bruce Westerman from the 4th Congressional District. We talked about the debt ceiling limit and Donald Trump's decision to go with the Democrats' suggestion. We also talked about DACA as well as his forestry bill, and he's the new chairman of a subcommittee there. It has to do with, I think, natural resources. Anyway, all of that coming up here on the Paul Harrell program. Let's start, though. Let's start by going to the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Headline here, State's revenue falls short of forecast. Can we show that to the audience who are listening online, Facebook Live, YouTube? State's revenue below forecast. August total 5.4 million less than in same month last year. Now, I'm going to do something here. I'm going to keep referring back to this headline. States revenue falls short. Okay? Now, the one I have, the one that was actually printed in the paper, sometimes they do this. How many people think read the online versus the actual tangible corporeal version? I don't know. I think more people probably are going to see this headline. The headline that I have in front of me that's on the paper is States revenue falls short. That's it. The one online, the one that you're seeing, States revenue below forecast. August total 5.4 million less than in same month last year. It's still conveying essentially the same thing. But if you start reading this, you'll find quickly that something, I don't know, there's something interesting about talking about how the state's revenue is falling short when in fact we're having record revenue. So that would actually mean something different. That would actually mean that your revenue projections are wrong. Now, we can go to a flashback a couple of weeks ago where Duncan Baird actually got, the budget director for the governor, actually got a massive increase in salary. And, of course, his job is to forecast the budget. He got this increase in salary after he failed to project the budget accurately, which caused the governor to have to cut $113 million in total from last fiscal year and this fiscal year. And then they said we have a revenue problem, not a spending problem. They were very key to point that out, by the way. They didn't say we have a revenue problem, not a spending problem, by the way, because they were responding. This was breaking news. No, they know who you are. They said we have a revenue problem, not a spending problem, because they know the criticism. They're trying to get out in front of the criticism. Listen to this. Arkansas's total general revenue, the second paragraph, Arkansas's total general revenue collection of $468.2 million last month also fell $500,000 short of expectations. However, after revenue in July set a record for the first month of the fiscal year, state agencies will have more cash available than expected so far in fiscal 2018. Stop. Again. Headline is States revenue falls short, but if you dig into the actual second paragraph here, you find out that they have record. July set a record for revenue. Well, that's weird. That means that it's their revenue projections that are off. And you know what? That would mean that we're actually spending too much money. If the government is getting record revenue and it's still falling below projections, how does that not indict the Republican majority, the leadership that refuses to stand up to the governor? And it also exposes Governor Hutchinson as being somebody who has spent money. This guy has increased spending the 3 times that he's been, 3 years he's been here, $133 million, $142 million, and now $170 million. That's how much he's increased spending here, folks. It's almost $500 million. Now, keep going down. They do talk about income tax collection is down for individuals and corporations. I was amazed. Well, not really amazed, but I definitely took note of how many times they talked about how the sales tax projections in this article were actually down. The sales tax projections. Hang on one second. Here we go. The widest gap compared with expectations for August came from sales and use taxes, which at $200.4 million fell $4.7 million below the projection from the Department of Finance and Administration. Okay, they repeat this a lot, and this is because, of course, they want more taxes. They want the internet sales tax, and we've debunked that argument a million times. But scroll down a couple more paragraphs, and you find that this quote, however, sales and use tax revenue was $200,000 higher this August. So we actually are, again, seeing record revenues. And again, what was the headline? States revenue falls short of forecast. I mean, what? Come on. Would it really be a biased headline if you said, in spite of record revenue, state's forecast falls short. Wouldn't that be the headline that kind of sums up and indicts a lot of these people here? Let me ask you this. Do you think it's possible that the Republicans who are in leadership, who are proving themselves to be very reliable progressives, do you think it's possible that they are projecting so high, so unrealistic expectations so as to show the need for more sales taxes and more taxes? Do you think that's possible? The article goes on. Combining the first 2 months of the fiscal year, Arkansas has collected $10.8 million more than officials first projected, despite sales and use tax collections that were below the mark twice. Again, $10.8 million more than officials first projected. And yet the headline is that we're missing revenue projections. Not that we're having record revenues. It's interesting. And notice how Asa Hutchinson, the quote here, he actually really kind of ignores the fact that they have record revenues. No surprise. The newspaper here, the Demgaz, quotes him as being optimistic about Tuesday's report. Quote, "This report reflects the overall strength and growth of the state's economy," Hutchinson said in a statement. "The 2-month revenue picture is above forecast, but the continued sluggishness of sales tax collections bears watching." That's Governor Asa Hutchinson. Now, I want to remind you, why is the governor focused on the sales tax collections? Now, keep in mind, Amazon has voluntarily been collecting sales taxes. But I want to take you to a flashback. We have cities all across this state who are now listening to the lobbying arm for government, the Municipal League. The Municipal League is asking city governments, in many cases, to go against the state representatives that represent the same constituency and asking them to pass resolutions begging Governor Asa Hutchinson to call a special session and pass an internet sales tax that was just defeated a few months ago by the good defense of real conservatives who were bucking the leadership of Asa Hutchinson, who were bucking the leadership of House Speaker Jeremy Gillum, who were bucking the leadership of folks like Speaker Jonathan Dismang and Majority Leader Jim Hendren, who thought this was a good idea. Keep going in the article, because this is fascinating to me. It quotes Larry Walther of DFNA, and then, towards the end, quote, "But sales tax collection in August was mostly flat compared with the previous year, despite the addition of taxes that online retailer Amazon began voluntarily collecting in March." This article, you've got to know how to read between the lines, but this article this is really interesting information here. I think it's being somewhat misrepresented with the headline and the approach of the story, but I will say this. We are still short on sales tax collections, even though Amazon is voluntarily collecting them. Now, what does that tell you? It confirms everything you've heard on this program about how we are actually in a budget crisis in this state. We are spending far too much money in this state, and the reason they proposed a new tire tax. They increased an old tire tax. They passed those tire taxes, by the way. The internet tax, the gas tax. The reason why they did the military retirement tax increase, which is now what we need to call it because it's a net tax increase. They cut taxes for military retirees, raised taxes on digital downloads, soda, and candy, and we now know that that's no longer a wash. It was no longer neutral. It was no longer just some neutral shift. It was actually a net increase on the people of Arkansas. They were trying to find revenue everywhere they could from you and me because Asa has increased spending so much. And you see him mentioning the sales tax. It's concerning. We need to watch this. Isn't that nuts that their sales tax projections are not they're not hitting their mark, even though Amazon is collecting the tax? Is that not crazy to you? I mean, if you've been listening to this show since we've been doing the live remotes down at the Marble Palace, doing all of this stuff, I mean, the coverage, this has got to be shocking. That's why I kind of got conspiratorial, thinking, are they setting their projections so high so there will be shortfalls? And then the media, of course, the lapdog media, the lapdog legislature, they can just start talking about how we've got to have more revenue from the people. The phone number to call us, text is 870-275-9799. Gosh, folks, we're going to talk some Jake Files here in a minute. We do have a Talk Business and Politics article, Roby Brock, the headline, Notes from the Campaign Trail. And you know what they mention? They don't mention this programmer, but they do mention conservative talk radio raising a ruckus, calling for the resignation of Jake Files. Pretty sure we've been doing that for the last 2 weeks. We got to go to break. Back in a minute.
Bob Maloney here from ASA News, The Parrot. Breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock. Over now to our new on-site reporter, Susan Shenanigans. Susan?
Thanks, Bob. The governor has just announced that a Blue Ribbon Task Force is to be formed.
Today, I'm asking your support for a Blue Ribbon Legislative Task Force to be created and directed to recommend further reform.
Now we go live to the chamber to listen in for more information on the task force.
I hereby call this session into order. First on the agenda for today is the formation of the Blue Ribbon Task Force. Is there anyone who would like to give their thoughts on the task force?
Yes, as someone who's deeply conservative, why is the governor choosing the color blue for this task force? Sounds like he's really a Democrat loyalist. Why not a red ribbon to prove he's a true conservative?
Well, I represent Walmart, and we agree with the color of the task force ribbon. The color blue is best consistent with the Walmart brand.
I object to this choice. Blue is the wrong color ribbon for this task force.
Well, who are you?
I am Mr. P.C. Wrights, and I represent Target, and we want the ribbon to be red, not blue.
Hold it right there. This seems like a tough decision. Why not ask the governor to call a special session at a later date for an important decision as this?
I think this is something worth talking about. I motion that we decide the color of the ribbon today.
I second it. Fine. We can decide it now. Does anyone have any other suggestions for the color of the ribbon?
I think the color should be white.
Whoa. Hold on. Definitely not white.
I agree with Mr. P.C. Wrights. Maybe we should choose green for the farmers.
You like the color green because you are a farmer. I think it should be purple, so we can display how Arkansas is an extremely moderate state.
Why are we even discussing this? Shouldn't we be talking about tax reform instead of wasting time with this?
Well, the people have spoken. They believe this is worth talking about, so we are deciding this now.
Excuse me, sir, but shouldn't the color of the ribbon be rainbow to include all types of people?
Please, silence your phones.
I just received a call from Walmart HQ, and they agree with, what was your name again? My name is Fabulous. They agree with Fabulous that the color should be rainbow.
Target concurs with the decision of it being rainbow-colored ribbon.
Is there a motion to make the ribbon rainbow-colored?
I motion to make the color rainbow.
I second the motion. The motion carries because I said so.
The committee will now vote and not be on record to keep the people in the dark. Back to you, Bob.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you for listening to ASA News, The Parrot. Next up, there are reports of a gorilla on top of the Capitol Dome demanding massive sums of taxpayer cash. His name? Medicaid expansion.
PHP Parody. Want to go back and listen to previous shows? Apple users can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Don't have an Apple device? Head on over to paulharrell.com and click on Podcast. It's free and available 24/7 because the Liberty Machine never sleeps.
So as we've been talking these last several weeks about the resignation of Jake Files, I mean, we have framed this as the coming resignation of Jake Files. The question is whether or not it's going to happen in time for a duly required, duly needed, I think, special election, or is the governor and the leadership, along with GOP, the Arkansas GOP, are they just going to not call a special election, wait wait until it's too late, then have Jake Files step down, and then deprive the people of Fort Smith of adequate representation during the fiscal session. So we know that Jake Files is going to resign. If you've read the FBI affidavit, you would clearly understand that it is an immense problem what we have going on here. I mean, we're talking check numbers and amounts. We've talked about this really for a long time. So yesterday we covered the story that broke while we were on the air that the Senate Republican caucus has now decided to make an announcement. They've now decided to change their stance on all of this. They've now decided to make headlines that claim that they're doing something that's actually significant, when in reality this is just trying to show that they're doing something without actually doing anything. I actually think they would have been better off doing nothing. See, what's happened is the Senate Republican caucus, Jim Hendren, the majority leader, the governor's nephew, has now come out and said that if you're indicted or if you are charged with a crime, then you will no longer be able to serve in a leadership position, or you'll no longer be able to serve on a committee. Presumably you could still be senator, but I mean, So I just think, well, it doesn't really change anything. That doesn't require that Jake Files, resign. That doesn't require, and no, they can't force him. Everybody knows that, okay? People say, well, they can't force him. Yeah, I know they can't force him, but they really can. Do you understand what I'm saying? They really can. It's the way the party works. It may be the only good thing about the party system today is that they can essentially, pull rank and say, hey, look, this is bad for the party. And yet they're being silent on all of this. Now, I'm going to read to you Roby Brock's piece about Files. He quotes Jake Files about the media coverage about him. Quote, I was recently contacted by law enforcement officials who are investigating allegations of misuse of funds from a GIF grant. I was fully cooperative, and I will continue to be, but I want to make clear that I have not been charged with any crime and continue to deny any claims that have been alleged. I am confident that when all the facts are brought to light, I will be cleared of any appearance of wrongdoing, which that is just a blatantly false statement. Even if he's found not guilty, even if he's never charged, he will never be cleared of any appearance of wrongdoing. Roby Brock writes, the brouhaha sparked an increase in social media and conservative radio conversation for Republican leaders to call for Files' resignation. Now, this is what I was doing. I don't know. I know there are others, but I know I was certainly calling on leaders to call for his resignation, like Asa, like every politician that's been on the program, as well as Doyle Webb, the Arkansas Republican Party chairman. I mean, this is not something that you can rest on. And you can't say, you just have to take your lumps. I know you want Representative Matt Pitch, who's already declared he's going to run for Files' vacant seat. I know you want him to be able to be the next senator. But you cannot play this Game of Thrones-like chess here. You need to have a special election. He needs to go immediately because this is really about the integrity. And the media is very interesting here because by and large, the liberal media is not piling on saying, look at the Republicans, look at the social conservatives, and look how unethical they're being. Which is really strange that the media here gives the Republican leadership a pass time and time again. You don't see that happening on the national stage with Donald Trump ever, or with any of the other Republican in leadership. Even though I think they're rhinos, you don't see them get a pass by the media unless, but you do see Asa Hutchinson going on MSNBC or CNN to criticize Obamacare repeal, and he gets a platform for that. Here's what Jim Hendren had to say. The Arkansas Republican caucus is committed to ensuring that the people of Arkansas have confidence in the Arkansas State Senate and the integrity of its members. Because of recent revelations that jeopardize the confidence, we believe action is needed. Action is needed, but it's not an action that actually is going to do anything. That's what I'm trying to tell you, folks. It's not an action that's actually going to do something because Jake Files still remains in office until he's charged with the crime and I guess, is put in jail. And then he doesn't need to be on any committees like the head of Revenue and Tax. Folks, my interview with former state representative Mike Wilson on GIF next.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
The General Improvement Fund is state surplus that's divvied out for different types of projects. And years ago, it was something that the governor worked on. Well, when Mike Huckabee became governor, the Democrats in the legislature, primarily Senator Nick Wilson, Pocahontas, didn't want to see that happen. So they came up with some new ways to divide that money up that kept the governor from having the kind of control that the executive branch had in the past. And the thing has evolved through the years where it's become kind of a legislative slush fund. Now, I'm not going to tell you that there aren't many wonderful needs of government that have been funded by that. I mean, there are fire trucks for our volunteer fire departments and senior citizen centers and things that are, properly done and done by the book, and people can be proud of that. But the system itself, unfortunately, lent itself to some corruption, and this is the ultimate example of it. The example in Washington County, the first example, and this kind of thing that we apparently see in Sebastian County is another example of what happens when you have this type of just corruption. It is what it is.
We're talking with Mark Johnson. He is the president of the Republican County Chairman Association, also Pulaski County Chairman of the Pulaski County Republicans. But he's not speaking for those organizations here. He's just coming on, giving his personal opinion. He's called for Jake Files' resignation. So just talk to me about this, Mark, because like you said, you've been doing this for 37 years. This is not what you wanted. Republicanism in Arkansas has always tried to stand for clean government compared to the Democrats. And yet here we are where they're not calling for his resignation, or at best they're stalling so that they don't have to do a special election, which I believe is a form of soft tyranny. They're trying to make sure that their chosen person gets to kind of step in. We have the leadership of the Republican Party down at the Marble Palace, who are not saying anything. The governor is not saying anything. And, the media is not saying anything that much. I mean, you have the Times record. Kudos to them. But, I mean, if you Google Jake Files' name, you really won't find too many articles past the middle of last week where this is a huge thing. And you would think, especially since he's a Republican, and especially since the Republican Party is supposed to be different than the Democrats, everybody would be piling on, and yet there's a lot of silence out there. Address some of that and the leadership's failing us right now.
Well, I'm loath to criticize other Republicans because of the intensity or lack thereof of their attack on this, and there's a propensity, Paul, for all of us to let the judicial process play out. But the difference in this case is that, as I said a moment ago, if we allow this to play out a little longer, then you're going to have it's District 8, I believe.
Yes,
you told me that the citizens of Senate District 8 wouldn't have a senator, and we've seen these things happen before, where, especially in federal cases, where the U.S. attorney steps in and says, "Here's your choices. You can go to jail for, let's see here, under the sentencing guidelines, 30 years or so, or you can go ahead and plead guilty to this, and this, and you might only spend 10 years." And that's the way these things work, and we know that, and
The Paul Harrell Program.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. I'm going to get at some point to this subcommittee on race relations. Senator Jim Hendren, and of course, the mainstream media here in Arkansas pounces on this. They led their story, Arkansas Matters. They lead their story with a black Democrat and a white Republican trying to form a subcommittee on race relations in Arkansas. And this is in response to Charlottesville, by the way. And anyway, it's amazing. It actually is leading me to speculate. I did this on Twitter earlier. Is the reason Senator Hendren is partnering with Democrat here, Joyce Elliott? I don't know. It just makes me wonder: is he going to need the support of Democrats to remain in GOP leadership? We've seen it before in the House. Folks, I had the pleasure of sitting down with former State Representative Mike Wilson. He did arguments in front of the Arkansas Supreme Court on general improvement funds today. When he got done, he called the program, and it sounded like this. All right, folks, please welcome back to the program. We have former State Representative Mike Wilson is with us, and we were telling you about this earlier in the week. Today is Thursday. Today there were arguments in front of the Arkansas Supreme Court about general improvement funding. Former State Representative Wilson, what can you tell us about what went on in the courtroom today?
Well, today the court heard oral arguments, paper briefs that had already been submitted to the court. The court heard oral arguments, fleshing out to some degree the written briefs in this case, which is an appeal from the Pulaski County Circuit Court concerning the constitutionality of certain appropriation measures made to the planning and development districts across the state. This case concerned several appropriation acts to appropriating state money to Central Arkansas Planning and Development District, and that's what this case concerned today.
Just tell us where we stand right now on this. I mean, I've read some of the briefs, that are out there on this, and you make a compelling argument. You mentioned the 14th Amendment of the Arkansas Constitution, and I mean, you believe that if we're going to fund like a rural fire department, then the full body of the General Assembly needs to appropriate that and not, give it to a planning and development district.
Right. The transfers to the Planning and Development District allow, by their internal deliberations, they allow individual legislators to direct where the funds actually go. So, for example, legislator Joe Smith may decide that the fire department and part of his district needs state money, but and direct that money to go there, and a different fire department in the other part of his district receives nothing. Those directions and control by individual legislators violate Amendment 14 of our Constitution, which prohibits local and special acts, so that the direction of state funds by one person to any sort of charitable organization is and should be prohibited. That's the basis of my suit.
So let's talk about the past. You've already, you already did this once and you won.
Yeah.
And
right.
They essentially said, okay, in order to get around the court ruling that said we can't give this taxpayer money to individual legislators and have them go and get the credit, and I think it's just a slush fund for re-election to buy votes, essentially. We can no longer do that. So instead, we will, these are my words, essentially launder the money through the planning and development districts, and somehow we will indirectly still be able to achieve the same thing, still be able to get positive press out of all of this. So let me ask you this, Mike Wilson.
Well, your understanding is exactly correct. It is a money laundering scheme or artifice that permits individuals to direct where taxpayers' money goes, and that's exactly what has happened as a result of the earlier cases from some years ago, where the legislature directly transferred money. This is an indirect transfer utilizing the scheme of the development districts, which do what the legislator tells them to do. And that proof is in the record in this case, in this current case, over and over and over. So it's there. It's for the Supreme Court to decide whether that's proper.
If the Supreme Court sides with you, if they agree with you and your criticism of this, do you have any suspicion that the legislature will again try to come up with some way to undercut what this is?
Well, I certainly do. Public exposure of this collusion to utilize the planning and development districts, public exposure and publication will and has already resulted in stopping the improper transfers. For example, the governor, to his credit, made it known in this last session of the legislature, the 2017 session, that he did not want this sort of scheme followed. And the most recent session did not utilize that method anymore. Now, remembering that my suit began in 2015, it covered the previous General Assembly appropriations for that biennium, for that 2-year period. This last go-round, the governor made it clear that he did not like it. In addition, the recent developments in northwest Arkansas, which occurred after my suit was filed, the criminal indictments on the kickbacks and fraud, that has added fuel to the fire, although that's not my lawsuit. My lawsuit is a civil suit. The Northwest Arkansas proceedings are criminal proceedings out of Fort Smith, I believe.
Yeah. You did mention the governor, though, and in doing that, I'm curious. We're not doing GIF as we did it, but a lot of that funding is now going under the purview or the discretion of the governor.
Yes. The governor, under the most recent, the 2017 session, has the ability to direct or release funds for state obligations, not local obligations, as is in my suit. The governor has a list in the Appropriation Acts or the option of funding a list of state needs. Colleges and universities are the notable examples, and other state programs, Medicaid, DHS, other areas that the governor is allowed under the current law to release funds as they're available. That's not the case in the suit that I brought.
Okay. In
the suit that I brought, the legislators individually decide utilizing the planning and development districts as a cover.
Right. So, the question would be, the practical reality of the way things were done is that you have legislators, getting credit one way or the other, whether it was the old way of directly doing it or the indirect way using the planning and development districts. Do you foresee, if the governor's now in charge of giving money here or there, maybe a similar result to where you might have a headline in the paper that says Representative so-and-so fought really, really hard and got ASA or whoever the governor is to give money to this local area? We could end up with a similar situation. Do you disagree?
In a sense, it's perfectly legitimate, right, and proper for a legislator to advocate for programs in his local district. That's where all 135 members agree or permit it. It's unlike the situation that exists in my suit, where only one person decides. In other words, when the legislature appropriates funds for colleges and universities and gives the governor a list of which ones to fund first, so to speak, I can't complain about that. The Constitution allows that. The Constitution prohibits, on the other hand, the local and special transfers of state funds to anybody.
And so you're saying that the rural services, when this GIF money now goes under the rural services at the discretion of the governor, you're saying that wouldn't be a conflict?
Well, it might not, depending on how the bill is drawn. If it says to rural services for agricultural development programs at an experiment station, nothing wrong with that at all. That's a state state purpose for a division of one of the universities, maybe, or rural services or anybody, as long as it's specified in advance what the money is to be used for. Here, in the lawsuit that I'm involved in today, there is no specification as to how the money is to be used.
Right.
And that subverts, or actually prohibits, it makes it impossible for the funds to be audited, for example.
Yes.
How do you trace the accountability if you don't know where the money's supposed to go?
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's another fatal, I think, feature of the acts that I challenged in this case.
We're talking with former State Representative Mike Wilson. He was in front of the Arkansas Supreme Court today about this lawsuit. Similar cases he's already won. Of course, the legislature takes steps to get around that so they can still continue to, give away taxpayer dollars. And what I do agree with you that it is in violation of the Arkansas Constitution to be able to do this individually. So I got another question for you, if you have the time for it.
I do.
Okay. So in these economic planning and development districts, there is, from my understanding, there's unspent money. And I would like to know do you know how much money? And if you were to say the Supreme Court were to side with you, what would happen to that unspent money?
Well, if the court decides in favor of my position, it could order the refunds of any unspent taxpayers' money, could order refunds to the state. And that's one possibility. The court could also send the case back to circuit court for the trial court for the same purpose. And it may be necessary to have hearings and see how much money's left and force the planning and development districts to account for any unspent funds. And it may go as far as to require them to return or refund the entire amount. That could really be significant because we're talking, in my case, $20 million statewide. That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money. So do you know how much unspent money is sitting in some of these places right now?
In the case of Central Arkansas Planning and Development District, the one that I sued, the one that applies to me where I live, there was about $2.5 million unspent at the time the suit was filed. And whether they have tried to utilize any of that money or not, I don't know.
Okay. All right.
I don't know yet. Underlined.
So what happens next? When can we expect a decision from the Arkansas Supreme Court?
Now, this is just a real subjective observation, but from this morning's arguments, it seemed to me that the court was thoroughly familiar with the facts of the case, which suggests that a decision by the court may not be very far off. I would guess a matter of weeks or maybe even less. I don't think it'll be very long.
Okay. All right. Former State Representative Mike Wilson, we appreciate you coming on. I also appreciate your commitment to the rule of law and working hard in this lawsuit. I think it's really going to be good for the people of Arkansas, and so we can actually follow the law, control where our tax dollars are going.
That's our intention, Paul, and thank you for your public service.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Be safe, okay?
You bet. Thank
All right,
you.
Folks, we're going to take a break. Back in just a moment. Arkansas small businesses are tired of taxes that are too high and regulations that work as obstacles to small business success. If you own a small business, it's time to take action. Now, I'm not talking about the local chambers of commerce. I'm talking about an organization that's actually run by small business owners and are fighting for small businesses right here in the state of Arkansas. They're called Conduit for Action, and they're on your side. Conduit for Action is here not to get something from the government, but to be left alone by the government. Think of them as your personal advocate for limited government at the Capitol in Little Rock. If you're tired of all the politicians talking with no results and ready for action, start outsourcing your government affair needs with Conduit for Action. Go now to conduitforaction.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforaction.org, and stand up for small business in Arkansas.
What you cooking? It smells familiar.
I'm cooking something amazing, new, and different, and you're going to love it, babe.
Really? It seems like we've had this dish before.
Don't believe me? Come and taste it for yourself.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm right. This tastes just like Obamacare.
No, actually, it's the new private option. I call this fantastic new dish Arkansas Works.
That's odd, because it looks and tastes just like Obamacare.
Why do you always have to be so critical? I'm in here cooking, trying to do something nice for the family.
Because I thought we talked about this before. I don't like Obamacare.
You just need to give it another chance.
So you admit it's the same?
No, it's different. It's Arkansas Works.
Let me ask you something. Does it smell like Obamacare?
Yes.
Does it taste like Obamacare?
I suppose so.
Are you using the same ingredients to make it as you used to make Obamacare?
Yes.
Then how is your so-called new dish, Arkansas Works, not Obamacare?
Well, let me explain, honey. You will remember, recently, I had my name legally changed at your request, right?
Yes, I know. You had it changed from Duke to Rover. I dislike the name Duke, and I think Rover sounds so much more personally responsible.
Well, now that I'm called Rover instead of Duke, I believe I can take the same recipe and ingredients and create a dish with the same smell and taste from before.
Okay.
And because of my name change, you will love it.
I'm not buying it. And I just realized the name Duke and Rover are both common names for dogs. PHP Parody.
All right, folks, 870-275-9799. That is the telephone number to contribute to the program. That's 870-275-9799. Let's see here. Yeah, I want to thank Mike Wilson for calling in the program, talking to us right after the arguments before the Supreme Court. This could seriously redefine what is the constitutional role of the legislature, the General Assembly, when it comes to distributing taxpayer dollars. Now, you and I both know that the legislature, they're supposed to be in charge of the purse strings, right? And but there are limits on that, and that's what you have Mike Wilson challenging here, is that, look, he fought hard and he won a lawsuit, and then the legislature went around a court opinion and laundered the money. And you heard him say, did you hear him say he agreed with that I came characterizing that properly? That's exactly what this is. And it really just goes to like, what is it going to take to change the status quo, right? I mean, the only thing I would say that, you know, and we didn't get into this in the depth that I could have, but the fact that general improvement funds have gone away and they've been given to the governor to distribute, I mean, my point is still the same. You may have the exact same situation. And does the governor, when he gives away money from his, from now what's under rural services, which is under Arkansas economic development, has that money been allocated for a specific purpose? Because something tells me the answer is no, it hasn't. And what they're going to say, by the way, well, we don't have to get into any of that. But the thing is, I mean, because there's defenses for it all. I just feel like, look, I want to stop taxpayer money being used to promote yourself as a legislator in the press. I also want to stop Jake Files and John Woods and Mike and Neal. I mean, what they've done is actually steal the money for themselves. But I don't want you to be able to use it for political gain. And that's what's going on right now. That's what's been happening right now. And you can actually see this in other forms. I mean, speaking of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, just what do you think your taxpayer dollars are doing, first and foremost, when Asa Hutchinson has an announcement that this Chinese paper company or this Chinese clothing company are now going to move to Arkansas at some point in the next couple of years, and at some point in the next 20 years, we'll get 1,000 jobs or 100 jobs or whatever. The media is very slow to ever check the numbers that they trot out. But you know the first thing, the taxpayer money going to private corporations to get them to move here, to undermine existing businesses here in Arkansas, the first thing that money is buying is public press for the uneducated, for the people that say, oh, the government creates jobs and ACE's creating jobs with taxpayer money by giving it away in the form of corporate welfare. That's the first thing that it does. So we have a similar trend here. We have a familiar trend here, which is GIF money. I want to help out the local fire department. I want to help out the Boys and Girls Club. And I'm going to be seen as bringing home the bacon. I'm going to be seen as a guy that's bearing gifts. And by the way, you should vote for me and keep me in office. The power of incumbency is already so immense. They're also equipped with $100,000, $600,000, depending on which chamber you're in. And it's crazy to me. Absolutely crazy that we just allow this. And then the mentality is for the everyday person, that's not getting the check. But then for those who are in the elite of an individual community, it just endears them more. You ever criticize a public official to somebody who works at the Chamber of Commerce? Anybody out there ever criticize a local public official to somebody that works in what is the chamber? I guarantee you that chamber person, most of the time, going to defend that person, going to defend them. I mean, unless they're conservative, obviously. And they'd be like, yeah. But see, most small business owners who are members of the chamber are conservatives. They just don't know that the chamber isn't conservative. The chamber works against your interests. The Chamber of Commerce wants to get the big business deals that actually undermine you. Because you see, giving your tax dollars away to big companies to try to lure them here is a gamble. And inevitably that gamble is going to fail. And when it does, the government has less money. And when it has less money, they come to the small business owner and they tax you more. That's where we are. Folks, that winds up the first hour of the Paul Harrell program. We have one more hour coming your way next. We have the Conduit for Action quiz coming up, as well as, we're probably going to get to the Race Relations Subcommittee. Some of the things that Jim Hendren said, which I just find very odd. And, of course, the media, they're leading the story over at Arkansas Matters. They actually, have a television report. It's not just a print, but Jessie Tanur, she's on the TV, and, of course, they start by talking about, well, here it is. This is the story. Quote, a black Democrat and a white Republican are crossing party lines in an attempt to form a group to analyze racial disparities from education to jobs to crime. And, of course, this was all suggested by Senator Elliott after the Charlottesville tragedy. Back in a minute.
Rush, Glenn, Sean, and Paul. This is Jonesboro's 1013 FM News Talk, KBTM.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
That's why I think a lot of people anticipate, people I've discussed it with recently, and several of them were attorneys, that's probably the kind of thing we're going to see in a case like this. The information that was in the affidavit seeking the search warrant that you just referred to a minute ago, it was powerful. It was very specific, and again, this isn't like something that could only exist in someone's lockbox in the basement of their office building. These are public records from the city of Fort Smith, the Western Arkansas Planning and Development District, the state of Arkansas. These are things that anyone can go look up and read them, and they create a trail of breadcrumbs that unfortunately is a very sad thing, but it shows some corruption. I mean, the young lady that worked, I believe her name was Ms. Gonzalez, that worked for Senator Biles, is involved. She was supposedly to be one of the subcontractors, and it appears there's violation of procurement process on this. And this is probably what led to the city canceling the contract on this ball field. But it's, Paul, when public officials get caught with their hand in the cookie jar, it's a sad thing, not just for that public official. It's for all of us citizens. It's a failure of our system, because these are truly positions of public trust. And when someone is abusing it, let's talk about a couple other resignations. You had one up in your neck of the woods. Senator Paul Bookout resigned, 2-3 years ago?
Yes, sir.
And he was not accused of stealing taxpayers' money. He was only accused of misappropriating campaign funds that had been given to his campaign. And I'm not excusing Senator Bookout for that. I'm simply comparing that's, to me, stealing tax dollars is a lot higher bar and a lot more serious thing than the fact that he bought a big screen TV with some money that someone gave to his campaign fund.
Right. I agree with
we
that.
had the same thing happen with on our side of the aisle, Lieutenant Governor Mark Darr, who just frankly did some very sloppy things in the way he handled his money and his accounts in both campaign and his office. And because there was an ethics complaint and it was proven to be correct, and there were those on both sides of the aisle. We Republicans, we're saying he needed to resign, and of course he did. But this is about real tax dollars and a conspiracy to misappropriate them and just Paul, we could talk about all day about should a sitting state senator be able to even go in and bid on doing this kind of work, even legitimately. There's places where you couldn't do that, but but this goes well beyond this. This is evidently corruption.
Yeah, the opportunity of corruption there, the temptation is great, and then you have, when it comes to him, the idea of him down there in the fiscal session. I mean, my speculation was last week, look, he's going to resign, but they're going to do it to where you don't have to have a special election, and that would mean that the city of Fort Smith and District 8, they're not going to have adequate representation, and I guess they're just willing to sacrifice that. Now, I mean, going back to this phrase, because I read your remarks where where you became the chairman of the Republican County Chairman Association, and you talk about Republicans and clean government. I think clean government means, hey, you stand up for transparency and you say, if we got to have a special election, we let the chips fall where they may. And, heck, I mean, any listeners in Fort Smith want to run for Jake File's Senate seat, give me a call, 870-275-9799, or text me. I'd love to hear from you. But, I mean, at this point, the sad thing is, Mark, we're talking with Mark Johnson, I don't think they're going to do this and allow a special election to take place, and that really is a shame to the Republican brand that you and other activists, grassroots people have worked so hard to convince our neighbors, hey, the Democrats, we're different than them. And yet This is going to be allowed to, and it just is a blemish on everybody. I mean, it makes anybody in Arkansas who's a Republican look bad right now.
Well, Paul, I've heard a lot of the criticism, and let's be honest now, I've heard a little bit of it from you sometimes. The Republicans and Democrats, there's no difference. They all do the same stuff. And that bothers me. It pains me. Frankly, in some cases, it's true. And when you have, always, we've had Republicans who are some of the finest people on earth, and then we have a few that are not the best, and then we have some, that are just total opportunists. And we have to watch out for that because we're now the majority party, and these opportunists are going to run as Republicans now. Instead, used to they would have run as Democrats because it was all about them and not about any kind of political philosophy in the first place. But by having, and we can't deny the ballot to anyone, and people need to understand that. In some states, Republicans can say, that Paul Harrell guy, we don't think he's very good. He's a crook. We're not going to let him run as a Republican. Well, we can't do that here. I mean, let's be honest, we had an American.
The maintenance of a free society is a very difficult and complicated thing, and it requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind. It requires a willingness to put up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you will spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. We lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
All right, folks, it is hour number 2. Welcome to the program. My name is Paul, and today is Thursday. I guess it was the Labor Day situation, kind of a day late here. Conduit for Action over at conduitforaction.org. They have their weekly CFA quiz on Arkansas Government 101. This edition of the quiz. Now, bear in mind, they've done other quizzes where you get to, give your approval of Asa Hutchinson and the other Arkansas constitutional officers. Really good stuff. Arkansas Government 101 quiz, government spending. Let's throw this up on the screen, shall we? Yes. Here we go. Scroll down, Joe. Let me read this. What does this say? How does Arkansas state government appropriate or spend taxpayer money? How much does Arkansas state government spend per person? And how does this compare to other states? What has spending looked like over time? Does Arkansas state government have a spending problem? Take the quiz, find out the answers to all of these questions and more. Joe, this is all you, man.
That last question, the answer is definitely yes. We do have a spending problem.
I don't know why.
It's not a revenue problem.
Well, so go ahead, click on it. Let's see where it takes us.
Ta-da!
Here we go. Okay. Under Arkansas State Constitution, to maintain separation of powers, it is the full Arkansas legislature which is tasked with deciding how tax dollars are to be spent or appropriated. Okay, so we click OK. I just clicked it. Okay. Number 1, what is the vote threshold to appropriate or spend taxpayer money in Arkansas, Joe? Is it A, a simple majority vote of both the House and Senate chambers, B, a 2/3 majority vote of both the House and Senate chambers, C, a 3/4 majority vote of both the House and Senate chambers, or D, a 3/5 majority vote of both the House and Senate chambers? Now, what's your reasoning here?
Okay, so normally I would say simple majority, but I feel like there's a special rule in this one.
Okay, now why do you feel that way, Joe?
Because spending taxpayer money usually is a lot. Like, there's a lot that could go wrong with it. Thus, look at the news that's been happening.
So you're
lately.
saying it would make sense that the founders or the people that started, that they would be very careful when it came to spending money. That was their intent was to make sure that more than just a simple majority agree to do X, Y, or Z with the taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
Okay, that's your feeling.
Yeah, that's not. They don't need just a perfect 50-50 split down the middle, or one extra vote to be able to spend the money and basically cut out the other party entirely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now this is interesting. This remind me to tell you a story about this. When you're done making your decision and we get to the vote. So what is it? Do you think? So you're ruling out it's not a simple majority to spend money in Arkansas. Is it a 2/3 majority, a 3/4 majority, or a 3/5 majority? Those are your options here. You got to decide on one.
I'm gonna go with 2/3.
Okay, 2/3 majority vote.
You want to know my reasoning?
Yes.
Because it's between my last three options. It's right down the middle.
Okay.
Because think of it this way: 2/3 is 66%, or 67%. 3/4 is 75%, and 3/5 is 60%. So it's literally right down the middle. So I'm just kind of
all right.
That's my reason for now.
Okay, that's your reasoning. All right, here we go. Number 2, in fiscal year 2015, what did Arkansas state government spend per capita per person? Is it A, $4,563 per person, B, $5,832 per person? I think that might have an extra one there on the side.
Yeah.
Is it C, $7,991 per person, or D, $9,031 per person? In fiscal year 2015, what did Arkansas state government spend per person to run the government?
I'm going to go with $7,991.
Okay, all right.
You're not going to ask me my reasoning? You usually ask
What's your reasoning? I mean, obviously, it's one of these. I don't know. What could be your reasoning? How could you distinguish between the two?
Okay, so one, I think 9,000 is a little too much. Like, I think people would be ranting and raving about this if we spent $9,000 per person. But
you would think.
Well, you'd think. But 7,000 on the other hand, it's still higher than.
It's almost 8,000. It's 700. It's $7,900.
Yeah, it's $9.
So it's
$9 from the $8,000.
Let's just say it's $8,000.
Okay, so $8,000. So the 4,000 and 5,000 numbers, they're fairly close to the states around us, and because I remember the numbers we were going over. David Crow's numbers.
Yep. I think that's what this is, yeah.
And 7,000 was one of the numbers that we were talking about. And
all right.
So I'm going with 7,991.
Okay.
So basically $8,000.
All right, question number 3. I think you're going to get this one. This one's easier. Of the following states, which state spends the most per capita or per person on state government spending? Arkansas, California, Illinois, or New York?
Going to go with Arkansas.
Think about this. I mean, New York, we've got the representatives like Chuck Schumer. California, we got Nancy Pelosi, and we got Illinois, the great state.
Yeah,
that's the home of Barack Obama.
They may have some of the most overall spending, not per capita, but just in terms of straight up numbers. But they have way more people than we do, and we have way too much spending for our population of what is it? What's our population? 3 million.
3 million people.
Oh yeah, we don't even. I doubt we have this. I think Manhattan has more of a population than we do.
Yes,
so
definitely.
I'm definitely going to go with Arkansas on this one because we have way too much spending. Granted, California, Illinois, and New York probably spend way more than us just in general, but I think per capita it's definitely.
You're saying
Arkansas.
they might have bigger budgets than us. I see,
but that's because they but when it comes to per capita,
per person, what does it take to make the government run?
Yeah.
So you're going with what?
Arkansas.
Okay, I think that's a good choice.
Yeah.
Number 4. Since 1991, how much has Arkansas state government spending, adjusted for inflation, increased? A, 15%, B, 20%, C, 61%, or D, 97%?
I'm definitely going to go with the highest one here because we've definitely increased spending a lot.
All right.
In the last, even the last few years
since 91,
with our quote unquote Republican governor.
Yeah, I believe this question is taken from a study done by the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics down at the University of Central Arkansas in Conway.
Yeah, so I'm definitely going to 97% on this one.
That's where this question's taken from. All right. Number 5, pretty general question. Does Arkansas state government have a revenue problem or a spending problem? Joe, what's your answer? It's a tough one.
Well, yeah. But
is it a revenue problem or a spending problem? What do we got?
In reality, it's a spending problem, but
oh gosh,
this comes to whose perspective am I looking at this from? From my perspective, or from our perspective, or am I looking at this from Governor Asa Hutchinson's perspective? Because clearly he thinks we have a revenue problem, not a spending problem.
Yeah, he does. So does Jonathan Dismang, the Republican president of the Senate.
I'm gonna go with my gut here and go spending problem.
All right, spending problem. You say that Arkansas has a spending problem. Number 6 question, the answer is yes, you have subscribed to the Conduit Fraction email list to get new surveys and articles automatically sent to your inbox. But it's not mandatory if you don't want to do it, but I would encourage you to do it.
I missed one, and it was the very first one.
Here we go. You got a B. You got 4 out of 5. That's the score.
3/4, 75%. Okay.
You didn't let me.
That makes sense.
You didn't let me. I like to see you hit the button.
I did.
Okay, all right.
I did hit the button. I just went way too fast.
I was not looking. All right, so Joe got a 4 out of 5, got an 80%. He did miss the first one. What is the vote threshold to appropriate taxpayer money in Arkansas? He chose 2/3 majority, and in reality, it is even stricter. We're 3/4 majority, 75%. Is what you need to achieve in order to spend money in Arkansas.
We need more platform Republicans down there so that way we can stop the ridiculous way we spend our money.
See, what's funny is, Joe, people listening to this program are going to think that we just scripted this entire segment because of what you just said. But we didn't.
No,
we did not script this. You said we need more platform Republicans to stop this stuff. Well, let me tell you a little story about last fiscal session. So this would have been last year. There was enough Republicans in the Arkansas Senate. It's only 35. You know this because we've taken the quiz. There's only 35 members in the Senate. There were enough Republicans that were willing to vote no to spend the money to fund DHS, which in turn was Arkansas Works and Asa Hutchinson's Obamacare baby.
Yeah.
There were enough to stop it for a time. Was it 10 of them? At first, was it the Tea Party 10 or the Tea Party 9, I think is what they were calling them. The media was calling them. And it was incredible that they ended up getting 2 people to switch. They got Senator Bart Hester, who was standing strong and did media interviews. He even came on this program. And then they got Senator Blake Johnson to go along with a scheme. And that's what it was. Because, you see, what the governor said was, okay, we'll change the legislation that cancels the funding for Arkansas Works, thereby allowing you, Senator Bart Hester and Blake Johnson, to vote for it. But the agreement was, because they had to get the Democrats to vote for this too in order to have the votes, in order to get to 75%. But the agreement was the Democrats trusted Asa to then line item veto that one thing. It was like intentional. It was like intentional. It was like suicide, is what it was. It was just like, hey, will you do something that everybody's going to see through, so I can get my way? It was incredible, and the pressure was mounting. I mean, I understand why it happens because they always get what they want, you know, special interest, and the pressure was mounting, and then they come up with this scheme that many people think to this day was unconstitutional. When he line item vetoed that, he didn't actually have the authority to do that.
To me, this sounds like some backroom government politics here.
Oh, it was. I mean, because can you imagine? The Democrat Party had to trust Asa to such a degree that they voted for a bill to end Arkansas Works funding. It was in the bill. They had to trust the governor to then go back and line item veto it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that? That stuff doesn't even happen in Washington, D.C.
Well, let's just think about that for a second. Not only did they have to trust him to the point where they would have to, like, he would do it, but they would have to be able to look at his track record and go, okay, yes, he would totally do this.
And the problem is, and what was even made it even worse is the Democrats actually had to trust.
Yeah.
The Republicans that caved on this, Senator Johnson and Senator Hester, I mean, they didn't trust the governor. You know what I'm saying? Like, they just did it so they could say, I didn't vote for a bill that had, I kept my word. That's on the governor. You know what I'm saying? That's on the governor. They got to say, I voted to end it, knowing that they didn't. And they would get mad at me, I know, and they'd say, but I did vote to end it, Paul, and that's just on the governor. If the governor is going to do that, that's on him. Well, I mean, how's that worked out for? I mean, you guys were all saying that under the understanding that that once people find out that Ace is not a conservative, there'll be some backlash. Well, that hasn't happened. Not from the party. Not from the other guys. I mean, you guys implemented Asa Hutchinson's agenda this past session a year after he pulled that scheme, a year after he undermined everybody. Not only that, he put you guys in a situation where you have to vote for tax increases or vote against the veterans.
Which no one wants to do.
Which nobody wanted to do. I mean, how many times does he have to do this before you guys say, we've had it with him? We've had it with the R at the end of his name. We're not going to worship it anymore. We're not going to worship the power structure because this is not fair, and it's not right either. And when are you going to just say, you know what, Asa is a Democrat? Asa is the best Democrat governor the Democrat Party has ever had. Because right now, the Democrat Party should be completely irrelevant, and yet they're being made relevant by a Democrat governor who calls himself a Republican.
But also imagine the pressure that the representatives who didn't want to vote for it were under, with the veterans in the gallery staring at them, thinking that if they don't vote for this, then they're going to basically lose their position because they're going to get primaried.
And then knowing, I want to recap this, knowing that he was going to lie down and veto it, because these guys were part of the negotiations. If they had said no, you know what they would have said? They'd have said, we gave them the opportunity. We ended Obamacare, and yet that wasn't good enough for them. Well, of course it's not good enough for them if the governor's going to immediately line on and veto it, and that's part of the whole scheme. And by the way, people still think what he did was unconstitutional, and I believe his office thought it was unconstitutional because in the next special session that they did, they when they didn't need the 3/4 because it wasn't a fiscal session, they put on the agenda basically something that ensured the program would continue if there was a court challenge and what he did was found to be unconstitutional. So they essentially bypassed the constitutional requirement with legislative sleight of hand of 3/4. So I say all that to say this, Joe. The reason it's 3/4 is because the people that wrote the Arkansas Constitution took very, very seriously spending money and appropriating money. And if you're going to take all of our money and you're going to give it to people who are not working in a perpetual welfare program that continues to explode and continues to put us on the hook in the future, you're going to need an accurate representation of 3/4 of the people. And they almost didn't get it. And, you know, we just didn't have enough people. We didn't have enough people who were committed to the platform to a degree that they were willing to take all of the criticism, all of the freakouts, and actually end the program. They didn't have enough. And that's the truth of the matter. And I've enjoyed going through this flashback. Anyway, do we have to go to break? Is that what you're doing? Yeah, it's 23 after, so we need to go to break. Were you going to do something else?
No.
Did you miss another question?
No, I only missed one question.
Do you accept these results and affirm these results on the CFA quiz?
Well,
last week you didn't.
It's too late for that. Like, I've already taken the quiz.
But you do affirm the results. You're not going to come back tomorrow and say, this question was worded funny.
No.
You're not going to do that, right?
The only one that I could see where that might be a thing.
Okay, never mind. We're
going
to
number
break.
5,
All
but
right.
it's... I got it right.
Folks,
Why would I have to worry
before
about
we go to break, I want to tell you about iText. They are the text to trust. To business owners, if you're worried about cybersecurity and cyber criminals, I just want you to call iText. It's a free consultation. It's a way to be proactive because iText can protect your business. They also, by doing so, from cybersecurity and criminals, they can protect your bottom line. Right, because if you get attacked, if you're trying to ask somebody what a Bitcoin is so you can pay your ransom to get your data back, I mean, this is time that your employees are losing productivity, which means you're losing money. So don't be put in that situation. iText, they are the text to trust. Call them today for a free consultation. That number, 870-336-9778. That's 870-336-9778. Or you can find them on the web at itexusa.com. That's itexusa.com. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we'll be talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman from Arkansas's 4th Congressional District. Back in a minute.
This is ASA News, The Parrot. With breaking news from the Capitol in Little Rock, I'm Bob Maloney. There are reports circling around from politicians who are in the know, and the same phrase keeps being used. That phrase is new revenue generation. Let's go to our reporter on the ground from the Capitol, Haley Hogwash. Haley?
Thanks, Bob. Yes, it seems the more politicians I talk to, the more I hear the phrase new revenue generation. We're trying to figure out exactly what that means, but you can rest assured it will be good for the people of Arkansas.
Haley, it certainly sounds like something good. I like how the phrase uses the word generation. That makes me think this has got to be doing something positive for our children in the future. Haley?
Yes, Bob, some new developments. I've just been speaking to some people who are here and are not politicians, and they tell me the phrase new revenue generation is actually code for a new tax.
Oh, my. Well, if this is true, Haley, that would add to a growing list of new taxes that have barely made any headlines at all, so it's best not to discuss them here on ASA News, The Parrot.
Yes, Bob, I know it's sure to make government officials angry that their phrasing of the new revenue generation has been changed by the people and called a tax increase.
I would expect an announcement from Mother Government soon to set the record straight. What is the new tax? Revenue generation, Haley?
Well, this new tax, a new revenue generation would add to a growing list. First, there was a revenue generation on movies, books, and songs that people download using the internet. And next, there was the tax increase. I'm sorry, Bob, the new revenue generation on all purchases made using the internet. And now I'm told this new revenue generation is a tax on the people's patience.
I realize the people don't like it, Haley, but specifically, what is the new tax? Revenue generation.
No, Bob, I'm telling you, according to the activists here at the Capitol who have gathered and are listening to some radio broadcast, the revenue generation is literally taxing the patience of the people of Arkansas. I'm told the less patience you have with the government
better not tax our patience.
The more they will tax your patience and the more money you will owe at a later date. I'm also told the collection method on taxing your patience will be decided in a newly formed multicolored ribbon task force.
How taxing.
PHP Parody. The Paul Harrell Program.
Listen, I don't mean to open old wounds, except that I do. The phone number 870-275-9799. Look, in all seriousness, I just want people to know that I don't forget this stuff, and neither should you. This is grievance. I have grievance after grievance after grievance from all of these encroachments. And in many ways, it is a betrayal of the people of Arkansas. And, when it comes up organically like it did here with Joe, Joe is right out of college, and he, he's been working here for a while, but, he, a lot of this stuff when he takes these quizzes, you can see how genuine it is, how organic it is. We don't let him look at the quizzes until he takes the quiz. And so, he's able to just say, I definitely think that it would be more to spend money. Well, here in Arkansas, it was so strict. It was so strict. 3/4, you got to have 3/4 majority to spend your money on stuff. And that was such a high standard that the governor had to pull off a legislative scheme to make the hospitals and insurance companies and save some Republican establishment politicians' careers that they've bet their entire political career on the success of this program, which is not a good bet, because the gravy train will run out. And you know what? Eventually, there won't be, thankfully, Governor Hutchinson can be term limited. He can also be challenged in a primary, by the way. But Governor Hutchinson will not be the governor forever. There will not always be, for you hospitals and insurance companies, there will not always be an Arkansas Republican governor willing to go on MSNBC and criticize the Obamacare repeal process. There will not always be somebody who is unhappy with ending a program for able-to-work adults, a welfare program, the largest expansion of government in Arkansas history. That person in the governor's office will not always be there. I can assure you of that. Congressman Bruce Westerman next.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
Nazi running one time, and we had to gather everyone up and get the word out that we need to beat this guy. But because legally we could not keep him off the ballot. And that's the case, with a lot of these candidates. I'm not saying that was a very rare situation, but still, the fact is we have to be mindful of who these candidates are, and we have to what I call defend the brand. We have to protect what that brand means. We're the party of cleaning up Arkansas, not making it like it was for so many years. And the scandals like Nick Wilson. And let me mention another resignation story. There was a senator from North Little Rock back in the 80s, I believe, who resigned for a non-governmental related problem. I think it was some kind of fraud in his company, but he resigned, and there was a special election, and a gentleman won the special election, and then later that year there was the regular election, and he was defeated by one of the state representatives who could not run in the special election because of the prohibition on legislators running for when they already have a state office running for in a special election. So people say, well, that's just to grease the skids. Well, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, if someone is qualified, then the voters can make that determination. But it's important that they not be denied representation during, and people say, well, it's just the fiscal session. And, of course, too often people, that's just a rubber stamp.
Yeah, well look what happened last time. Last time, Governor had to do the veto, the line item veto scheme that some people didn't even think was constitutional. But, I mean, it was a contentious fiscal session last time.
Yes, it was. And also, with an extraordinary majority, I think it's 2/3, they can take up other legislation. And I fully expect that to happen. So there can be important things happen in this session. Mm-hmm. And it's just regardless of where the district is, those people deserve to have representation in it. And more than anything else, Paul, this has reached a stage of embarrassment and casting a bad light on all Republicans.
Mark Johnson, I appreciate you reaching out. I appreciate calling for the resignation of Jake Files, and you make some great points, and I really, really, really appreciate you coming on the program.
Paul, my pleasure. Wish I could get you without a podcast sometime, but I enjoy listening to your podcasts when I'm out on my lawn.
Hey, I appreciate that. Yeah, anything to pass the time while you're on the lawnmower. Appreciate it, Mark. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Thanks, Paul.
All righty,
yes,
folks. By the way, if you're an iTunes listener, that podcast, or iTunes or Apple iOS user, or SoundCloud, you get the podcast. Go to the iTunes store, type in the Paul Harrell program, and click subscribe, and you're going to get the show every day in 2 files. So, I mean, I would highly recommend it. Mark Johnson listens to it while he's on his lawnmower. We've got to take a break, folks. Don't go.
Paul Harrell Program.
We have Congressman Bruce Westerman with us. Congressman, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Paul, good to be back. It's been a while since I've been with you.
I know it has, and I know you guys have been really busy up there in Washington, D.C. How are things going?
Well, it's a busy month for sure right now, back here in September with a lot of deadlines looming, so there is no problem finding something to occupy my time right now, I can tell you that for sure. But that's the case most of the time here in D.C., pretty fast-paced.
Well, so let's get to just some of the current events that have happened this week. Starting with the most recent. It looks like, and this has just been all over the headlines about, President Trump and the debt ceiling negotiation, and now it's involving, a more prominent role for Democrats. And it seems like leadership wanted, an 18-month debt ceiling increase, and now we're only going to go for a 3-month. What are your thoughts on this whole process?
I've got mixed thoughts on it. I think we were blowing an opportunity here to start with because and a lot of the talks I've had about the debt ceiling in the past was that in exchange for voting to increase the debt ceiling, we needed to get some spending reforms, especially some restrictions on mandatory spending. This $20 trillion debt continuing to grow, and somehow or another, as huge as it is, it's almost like it's invisible. But we've got to do something to address that debt. So I was hopeful that when the debt ceiling came up, we were going to be able to enact some spending reforms so that we didn't have to deal with with raising the debt ceiling again, and hopefully get that debt going in the other direction. But I think the deal the president has cut with the Democrats, as far as I can tell, has no strings attached to the debt ceiling. And I guess if there's a silver lining to the cloud, it's that it only goes through December, so maybe we'll be able to come back in December and offer some real fiscal reforms before we raise the debt ceiling again.
I would certainly hope so, and I know some of this is tied to the Harvey relief, and who knows, by this time next week it may be tied to, South Florida relief. It's just interesting. Nobody talks about the debt ceiling anymore. I mean, I'm sorry, no one talks about the national debt anymore. And, my fear is, we used to talk about eventually the chickens are going to come home to roost. We're going to have to pay the piper. Nobody really talks about that anymore. We're mortgaging our children's future. And my fear is we got people up there, I know you're not one of them, Congressman, but that think, well, we've spent $20 trillion and nothing bad's happened, so we can spend 40. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, and there's no limit to it. When we have emergencies like Harvey, and this probably going to have some more spending, and FEMA's already out of money this year, that's the time when you have to take care of people's needs. So I don't have any problem with voting to increase funding to FEMA so that we can help people who are truly in need. But now we're tying the debt ceiling to that. They're putting a continuing resolution on it in the Senate. And I'm hearing now that part of the funding for the hurricane relief going to some grant programs that have a history of being misused during a natural disaster. So I'll probably vote against the bill when it comes back from the Senate. We have got to take a firmer stand on our spending, and it's really out of control.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, there is some, I think, good work going on in the House, just from what I can see. I understand you guys are finally passing 12 appropriation bills this year. The last one, or this week, you're scheduled to pass one, I guess. And this hasn't happened since like 2006. Talk about the importance of the appropriation bills.
Yeah, I think it may have even been since the 90s since it's happened.
Wow.
So, when we look at government spending, there are two categories. There's mandatory and discretionary. And on the discretionary side, you have 12 appropriation bills. One of the biggest ones is the defense appropriation bill, but you've got the interior appropriation, homeland security, all of those 12 bills that fund the agencies that provide the services that I think most Americans think are what the government's here for. But that's only about 25% of the total spending. actually going to get all 12 of those bills passed through the House, get them over to the Senate. But the Senate's sending a continuing resolution back to us today or tomorrow with the Harvey funding, so that on September 30th, the government won't run out of money and have problems that way. But instead of taking up our bills that we're going to send over there, they're just doing the CR up through December. But hopefully we'll have a negotiating tool so that the Senate will actually do the appropriations process instead of doing another continuing resolution.
So you're saying it's a good thing that the House is actually passing the appropriation bills, but as of right now, everything is still going to be kind of status quo until the Senate comes around and says, hey, we're going to start budgeting the way we're supposed to budget.
Yeah, and right now the Senate is sending a continuing resolution over so that you don't have the showdown at the end of September. But I think the House is going to be in much better positioning power because we can say we went through the appropriations process, we passed all 12 appropriation bills, we debated them on the floor. We were up till close to 11 p.m. last night doing amendments. It could go past midnight tonight doing amendments. But we're going to get through these 12 bills and get the appropriations package over to the Senate. All these appropriation bills have been through the Appropriations Committee process in the House. Lots and lots of work going into that. So, in my opinion, once we pass those bills and send them to the Senate, we can tell the Senate we're done until you pass those bills and send something back to us.
We are talking.
So that's the way the process is supposed to work,
and I certainly hope it does. I hope it gets back to, hey, let's start actually let's let Congress do what Congress is supposed to do, not this basically managing it from one crisis to the next, and gives the media the opportunity to say, oh, the debt ceiling and everything else. We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. Other news this week is the DACA announcement. First, we kind of had a lot of stuff in the press. Hey, this stuff is going to end in 6 months unless Congress acts. Now we kind of hear, well, it's going to end in 6 months, but, we might revisit it if Congress fails. So it's kind of now in the legislature's lap, the legislative branch's lap, for you guys to deal with this. And so what are your thoughts on this, Congressman Westerman?
Well, that's where it should be. It should have never been put into law by the administration, and the courts have said this. It continues to fail in courts. There are more attorney generals. I believe Arkansas's attorney general was even going to file suit on it. And it's a clear violation of the separation of powers, what the Obama administration did, setting up the DACA program. So it's one of the things that we're really working on here in Congress is, or at least in the House, is to restore the Article I constitutional authority to the legislative branch, where we're making the laws and the executive branch is enforcing the laws. So, it's not an easy issue to deal with, but it's certainly one that we were elected to deal with, and I think we'll come up with a good solution that follows the Constitution that's fair to people.
I mean, how are we going to do this? I mean, when you look at, I agree with what you said. He never had the authority. Obama never had the authority to do this. We have a situation where people who are crossing in this country illegally, we have not secured our borders. So it just grows and grows. This whole problem that we're now faced with. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders was talking about how this needs to be tied to in some way. Trying to secure our borders, whether it's building a wall or whatever. And, back when George W. Bush was trying to do his comprehensive immigration reform or the Gang of Eight bill, the conservative line on this has always been, look, let's figure out what to do with the people who are here illegally, but can we please do that after we stop, the influx of people coming in and breaking our laws? And that, to me, just from what I have seen, has always been a non-negotiable with Democrats and people on the left. So where does it go from here, Congressman?
Well, I think you summed it up pretty well. The first thing we've got to do is enforce our existing immigration laws. We have to secure the border. And, as far as what the president wants to do on securing the border and him making this agreement with the Democrats, I don't understand how all that plays together, but I hope he has a plan for it, because I think he had a lot of leverage on implementing some of his border security measures. But I will give him and Jeff Sessions and the administration credit, because the number of illegal border crossings has decreased tremendously since President Trump's been elected. And we need to continue to work on the operational security so that we know who crosses and how long they're here, and we've got to stop the illegal crossings. And, it's like we're trying to clean up the water now, but we need to go back and plug the pipe before we worry a whole lot about cleaning up what the problem is.
So tell me about, I appreciate your comments on DACA, by the way. Tell me about this Natural Resources Committee, because you are now the chairman of a subcommittee underneath that committee. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's the subcommittee on oversight and investigation. So Chairman Bishop named me the chairman of that subcommittee. There are 5 subcommittees in the whole committee. I'm also on the Federal Lands Subcommittee. I do a lot of work there in the forestry sector, because I have a forestry degree, and I'm the only one in the House that has that. But being able to chair that subcommittee is really neat from my perspective, because that particular subcommittee has jurisdiction equal to the whole committee, because we're looking at government waste, lack of transparency, those kinds of issues that deal in the whole realm of the Natural Resources Committee. So, I get to set the agenda for the hearings that we do, and kind of direct the discussions and the policy that comes out of the whole committee through that subcommittee. So I'm excited about that opportunity.
I'm glad you reminded me that in the audience that you're the only congressman up there with a forestry degree. I think that's really fantastic, and that's representing Arkansas well. I know you were involved in the forestry bill, so give us an update on that, and also, are you following what's going on out west? There's a lot of fires burning, thousands of acres out there burning right now.
Oh, absolutely. I actually made some trips out west during August, and it was pretty smoky everywhere I went out there, and the fires have only gotten worse since I was out there. So we're continuing to see these catastrophic wildfires, and we're going to continue seeing them as long as we keep the same policy in place, as long as we continue to do what we've been doing since the early 90s, and that's kind of a hands-off approach to managing our national forest. I don't know that many taxpayers realize that $7.1 billion of their tax money goes to fund the Forest Service, or that's how much went to fund the Forest Service in 2016. And the amount of timber harvested off the Forest Service was like $162 million, which is less than 3% of the money that was spent to fund the Forest Service.
Wow.
The Forest Service has become the U.S. Fire Service. It's the largest fire department in the world, with about 13,000 people who are dedicated to fire.
Gosh, I had no idea. But yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because it's just like every year, every season, there's going to be just massive wildfires somewhere in the country.
Yeah, we're spending close to $3 billion per year just to be prepared to fight fires.
Wow. Well,
it's when you really dig into the numbers and look at the magnitude of it, it makes you scratch your head and think you've got all these private forest landowners, you've got tribal forest landowners, you've got state forest landowners, and they actually manage the land so that it produces income for the ownership. And is an asset to have, and I think that's what our founders and the people, Teddy Roosevelt, Gifford Pinchot, the ones that established the Forest Service, that's the vision they had for the U.S. forest. Now, we've still got national parks, and we've got wilderness areas and all those things that are natural areas to be left to nature, but we've certainly got off course on what we're doing with our national forests.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly well, it's good to have somebody that's skeptical of the status quo there. Congressman Westerman, and I think a lot of people, that's why they voted for you, quite honestly.
Well, I don't know. It's neat to have an area of expertise that's unique in anything that you do. My career was my undergraduate degree is in engineering, so most of my work before I came to Congress was more in engineering than in forestry, but I did pass the Arkansas Registered Forester's exam, and I practiced forestry there in Arkansas and other places before I was elected to Congress. And it's when you get up here and you find out that the federal government owns hundreds of millions of acres of forest land, and you've got an expertise in that area, it's pretty valuable to have.
Mm-hmm. Congressman Bruce Westerman, I appreciate you coming on the program. Just feel free to keep us updated about what's going on. If you ever need to use this program for a medium to talk to your constituents, you're always welcome, and we do appreciate you coming on, sir.
Well, it's always good to visit with you, Paul, and I wish you a good day. I heard the weather's very nice back in Arkansas right now, and like in the Caribbean.
Congressman Westerman, appreciate it. Y'all be safe.
Thanks, Paul.
Do you need conservative legislation killed?
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
Nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
Came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you. Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions. Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Stewart in Craighead County writing to the program, just a point for consideration, we do not give our veterans enough credit with regard to the understanding of the bill exempting them from income tax, but at the expense of increase and other taxes on all Arkansans. If our legislators would have taken an unwavering stand against our Democratic governor, burn. I just called him that too. The bill would have been rewritten without added taxes. Just reduce a small bit of spending to cover tax reduction. Stewart actually goes on. He said the governor has little respect for the intelligence of the people of Arkansas. He chose to completely ignore the people's will with regard to repealing Obamacare, and his tax and spend increases are traitorous. Disappointment doesn't begin to describe the feeling of the workers in the street I talk to on a daily basis, and I'm simply a concerned retired citizen, praying for him and a 180-degree turn in favor of our Republican platform, fiscal conservatism, and return to trust in government. Stewart from Craighead County, excellent text message, sir. Thank you very much for this. Let's see, what else do we have? Hang on one second. It blew up in the last segment. Okay, so, Joe, tell me about the caller that we had. I know we didn't have time for him to come on, but he just texted me. He says that he's a contractor, that he just called in and ranted about the payroll taxes. If you want to talk, I'm open for discussion. I'd like to get in contact with him, maybe, and have him on the show.
Yeah.
What was he saying?
He said that he's a municipal contractor in the state of Arkansas, and because of payroll taxes and stuff like that, and other taxes in the state, that
make us like uncompetitive.
Make us super uncompetitive because his company organization is constantly losing contracts to other organizations in places like Missouri, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. I think are the three he listed, if I remember correctly.
And because they have a better tax environment, state, like a local environment.
Yes. Like payroll taxes and other taxes that enable them to go do contract work other places.
And this is the plight of the Arkansas business owner, worker. It's a shame. It's a shame that they don't care. You know. Their actions show that it's just not a priority to reform Arkansas government to where it doesn't need $7,000 a person to exist when the other states around us average, $4,000 or $5,000 per person. I mean, if you just did that much alone, think of how much tax dollars you wouldn't need to take from us. You could get rid of the income tax. But they don't do it. They just don't do it. Anyway, I want to remind you guys that our Liberty Machine t-shirts are for sale. They're over at paulharrell.com. We will be announcing a very interesting way for you to help support the show tomorrow. It's exciting. I'm excited to talk about it. I mentioned it at the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party. Told you guys what it was. I'm not going to tell the audience yet, but certainly tomorrow on Johnny Cash Friday, I'm going to be announcing. Do what? Yeah, Joe's excited as well. We're going to be announcing a way for you guys to help us out and us to give you more content that you want, more information that you want. And it's really going to be a way to build the Liberty Machine. Even more than you guys are building it right now just by listening to us, taking a stand against the status quo. But we need more help to do that. We need more help to get more ears, and we're going to do that with your help, and we're also going to be able to give you guys more content. Okay? So stay tuned for that announcement tomorrow. It is Johnny Cash Friday tomorrow. That's all the time we have for today. We're going to go to home. We're going to go to home. We're not going to go to break. We're going to go to home. Now, we'll see you back here at 4 o'clock, folks. Thanks so much for listening. Arkansas, be safe.